Welcome, everybody, to Before the Commit, episode 31. This week, we have Sam Kassoumeh from Security Scorecard, co-founder, director of product, head of product now. With me, as usual, I have my friend Dustin Hillgartner. Hey, Dustin, how's it going?
Hey, hey.
Yeah, so before we bring Sam on, there's an interesting bit of news from a company called Genie Security. They're a 5-person startup. They're 5 months old, and they're in the DLP space for AI. So they kind of like intercept AI messages and like prevent like CUI leakage or certain data that you don't want to escape. I mean, it's pretty much akin to an AI security gateway, right? Like things we've talked about, like Light LLM and Cloudflare AI gateway. So anyway, they raised $3 million and they were sold for about 50. They have a 5-person startup, and this company Sierra basically bought them. They is an acqui-hire. They attained some intellectual property. Basically, like I'm pretty sure they used AI to scale to this effect so rapidly. So $3 million is not a lot of runway for a 5-person team, although it's 5 months. So they certainly built something interesting.
Yeah. It's an interesting space. I mean, the AI gateway space, I believe, is kind of like the first product that you're seeing is from the security perspective around AI that seems to be a necessary part of your architecture. Some folks are using cloud AI gateways, in which case they're trusting a third party, which of course is still better than having everything go everywhere. And then the most sensitive of companies are using the on-prem AI gateways like Light LLM and others out there that they can deploy in their network and stop anything from getting to any third party at all. So it definitely seems to be a hot commodity right now, is to have an AI gateway startup in the security space.
I mean, it's interesting on that front itself. Like it shows that there's a market for, I mean, there is a market. You're seeing a lot of kind of companies that already have like, Cloudflare is a good example. Theirs is primarily focused around agent-based security, not necessarily LLM proxy-based security, but you're kind of seeing like that there's market validation. But what I found particularly interesting was that you had a 5-person startup, and I know we've talked a lot about the future of like, SaaS-based companies. I mean, essentially, this is a SaaS company. 5 people built it in 5 months, raised $3 million and sold it for 50. Very compelling kind of story from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing companies be able to do a lot more with less. I know that internally we're seeing engineers on average using like 95 to 100 million tokens a day. Now that's probably 90 or 80% cache tokens with Claude, but still, I mean, it's a huge amount of tokens that are being spent. I read an article today about how I think Microsoft was pulling back on AI based on the cost. Like they were pulling back on some of the providers. So you can kind of see the costs around these things as well. But the AI gateway itself is essential in your business if you want to have any sort of visibility or any sort of control over what everyone's doing with AI, both not only from the security perspective, but also just from like gaining knowledge about what's going on within your organization and gauging who's leveraging AI. It's so early in the AI sort of space that you kind of have to gauge who's using AI more than others. But like I said, you can do a lot more with less. I think I was reading that the creator of OpenClaw nowadays at Anthropic is like going through 1 billion tokens a month or something like that, which
He's at
clearly
OpenAI.
means, I'm sorry, yeah, OpenAI,
Yeah.
which clearly means that they're building orchestration on top of the agent harnesses for coding, which we're also doing internally. It seems to be where you get to, you start with tab completion and cursor, and you end up with eventual agents doing a lot of the work. And then eventually you're getting to the point where you're orchestrating, like you're almost like building your own horizontal scaling of the harnesses themselves internally, and having them automate more and more of the process.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of, I think, individual efforts going on within organizations. Like people come up with their secret sauce of how they're able to rapidly, scale themselves. So there's probably like, I bet you we could come up with like a formula, like coefficient, like employee productivity to agent productivity. Like, I wield the power of, 50 agents or something like that. And your competitive advantage in this like kind of new world is like your ability to maximize your usage of agents and build software in a way that you would have to have X number of headcount, X salary, overhead, and now you can augment your entire staff for your organization by just having a better formula, a better rig, as our friend says.
Yeah. Also, what I'm starting to notice in my own work is that as the models get better and better, the mid-steering, the pivots that you have to do midstream in a session are getting less and less and less. The opportunities to automate the entire coding process end to end, including all of the back and forth that happen with code reviews and failed pipelines and acceptance criteria and smoke tests and integration tests. All of that stuff is getting much more automatable in the sense where you're pretty much to the point at this point where if you get your governance dialed in and your skills dialed in around your repos, you can really kind of operate to a great degree through tickets or meetings, and have all that stuff fed in and building tickets and plans off of the meetings themselves. And the tickets actually end up merged at the end with code reviews without any human intervention. Of course, you got to get really, really good acceptance criteria. You have to have a really, really good test and integration test plan. You're finding a lot more of the work being before and after the coding. The coding is actually a very small amount of the work at this point. You're finding that dialing in the plans. I was thinking the other day, like, who's responsible for a bug? Is it the person who kicked off the agent, or is it the person who wrote the ticket at this point? Because the ticket is so much, is so important at this point as the initial context, that you'll find that when you go down a wrong path with agents, or when you miss an edge case, it has much more to do with the ticket itself.
I think that the idea that somebody that made the bug was responsible for it is both a cultural and a code smell. Because if that person has knowledge in their head that nobody else can solve the problem because they inherently created it, then it's a problem with the code. And also, it creates a culture of blaming. And like those two things go away with AI coding if you do it the right way. Because I found the bug, like, I'm going to fix it. Like, I don't need to like ask you, like, I'll just ask the code base, like, what is this bug? How did it get introduced? Do you know how to fix it? And if I can't, then there's a problem with the code itself, or, something of the structure of it. And then from the culture perspective, like there isn't like, oh, you broke it, now you have to fix it. Like it should be self-healing. The process should be self-healing. It shouldn't be like a blame game. Just fix it, like move on.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Cool. So we have with us special guests today for episode 31. Sam Kassoumeh is a co-founder of Security Scorecard. He currently serves as head of product. He co-founded Security Scorecard in 2013, and he's been central to helping build out the security ratings world before it was even a thing. You know, they kind of created it. It's really exciting to have him here. They now use it, I think, publicly. 25,000 organizations are using Security Scorecard for a variety of purposes: third-party risk management, board reporting, due diligence, cybersecurity, cyber insurance underwriting, and regulatory oversight. And before that, Sam worked at the Gilt Group and worked at some other places doing things like head of security and CISO. And yeah, just really excited to have a conversation with Sam about, you know, what he's seeing in this new world that we're in. Hey, Sam, how's it going?
Hey guys, how are you? Hey Danny, hey
Good.
Dustin.
Welcome, Sam. Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Good. So yeah, just to kind of hit it off the head. So you co-founded Security Scorecard in 23, long before AI was like a thing. And you guys kind of created a cyber ratings category.
Mhm.
And like we're doing a lot of advanced analytics and, you know, probably doing stuff with, you know, artificial intelligence or machine learning long before it was a buzzword. So what has AI actually changed for you? How is it different versus what it's accelerated, you know, in the world you're seeing right now?
Yeah, it's I mean it's a new world compared to when we started the company back in, you know, we were prototyping back in 2013 and we really went full time back in 2014. And you know, I think we raised a seed round with a prototype that we were building on nights and weekends. It took about 4 or 5 people to build it, and you know, if you clicked any of the buttons in the wrong order, the prototype would crash out. So I would say first and foremost, it's just much easier to prototype. You know, and you can vibe code a whole product and, you know, raise on that, where before we were, you know, 2 guys with an idea and a prototype that you couldn't click in a specific order, otherwise it would crash. So that's way different. But you know, beyond that, look, I think AI has really fundamentally changed 2 things. There's 2 things that I've observed that have really materially changed versus accelerated. Number one is interface, like user interface, user experience, interaction design, and expectations from users interacting is totally different. It's totally different. You know, B2B apps were always a little bit more stale than B2C in general. So when we started Scorecard, we invested quite heavily into UI because we believe that UX and experience could be a differentiator in your product. When a lot of products look stale, we had refreshing experiences. We used different color schemes, and we really tried to get the attention. And we always were complimented from customers. We heard compliments from customers saying, hey, we really like the interface, the way the product works. But in the AI era, it's completely different. You know, people are not expecting to click through a bunch of screens to get to an outcome. Like that's what a workflow used to be. But now the interface and the workflow is completely rewritten. We could resequence an entire workflow where you take the outcome and you surface that right up front. So when somebody logs in, a lot of the pre-processing can be done based on policies and existing settings, and you can kind of provide up front to a user what you think you know, and then allow a user to interact with that interface, with that chat, reason over, gain deeper insights. That's really, I would say, the big difference. You know, doing natural language actions versus clicking through screens. And to me, it's great because you know, we always wanted to reduce the amount of screens and steps that a person had to go through to get to their outcomes. So to have the ability to pre-process and serve people outcomes up front and run parallel tasks versus like long scale linear workflows, that's for us a big difference.
Yeah, I wonder, like, you know, just as a side note to that, like, you know, what do you see, like, you know, if people are like it's almost like you're going back to the operating system. Like people used to do like a terminal window where they were chatting like with a mainframe, and then we went to like, you know,
Yep.
web 1.0, web 2.0, and now it seems like we're going back to chat. So like how do you see like the integration of like these SaaS-based companies, like for example, like Security Scorecard, having more natural language, and how that context may open up new opportunities for how people interact with your platform?
That's a really good question. You know, I'm a big believer at Scorecard and in general building products. It's all about meeting the customer where they're at in their journey. And meeting the customer where they're at means understanding, you know, the persona who we're speaking to, and understanding what tool stack they're using today and what desired outcome they're trying to reach, both a local outcome, like, you know, I'm trying to produce a report, and then maybe a more global outcome, which is I'm trying to produce a report to serve to my boss to facilitate this biz dev deal to grow the business. So when I think about meeting the customer where they're at in the age of AI, I think a big part of it goes back to, like you said, tooling and operating systems. And you know, the way we're approaching it today is we're saying, hey, we'll meet the customer where they're at, both in terms of the processes that they follow today in their organization, and the tool stack that they use. Because there's no standard way to do third-party risk management inside of a company. Every company has a different process procedure, and folks have been trying to standardize it for 20 years. And I think people realize, because of different industry needs and protocols, there was really no, and reporting structures, there was really no standard way. So giving people the tools where they're at to facilitate that faster time to outcome. And the way I think about it, like the way, you know, I'm starting to see it manifest even in just the past couple months. Look, you want to serve people an interface that allows them to ask questions, reason over, you know, evidence, understand risk, get remediation paths, take actions, and that can be done all up front. That used to be very linear. Now that can be done almost instantaneously. You can serve that kind of information. We give customers the choice on how automated they want to make things. So depending on what part of a process they're trying to apply agentic workflows to, they may want full human control. They may want semi-automated processing, and then you serve them a result that they can review and also apply their judgment to. And then in some instances, there's folks that want full autonomous, or even agent to agent. So we try to give the flexibility. The last thing I would say is, you know, in the same vein of meeting the customer where they're at in their tool stack, is, you know, look, the way I think about Scorecard is today is, it's a threat-informed operating layer for supply chain risk and third-party risk, really end to end. And if you're an operating layer, you want to give people a UI, but you also want them to run through your operating layer in their other tools and have integrations. So I'm happy if people use my tool, but you know, we also integrate with foundational models. I think we can do a lot of things that foundational models can't do by themselves, which we can talk about, you know, with data moats and so on. But I think about deep integration into the foundational models through MCPs and connectors and plugins and skills, so that, you know, for companies that are going all AI first and they have corporate approved tools, you can thread in your capabilities into their workflows and they can get a richer experience out of it.
Yeah. So real quick, what is Security Scorecard? Yeah, we didn't really hit on that. Yeah,
we should probably start there. You know, that's a good place to start. Well, when we started Security Scorecard, we were a ratings company. We were a supply chain ratings company, and the whole idea came from, I think, as you mentioned, payments that we experienced as Stephen, my business partner, who you guys know, Alex. You know, we saw the market moving to the cloud. We saw more dependency going into supply chain partners, third parties, vendors. And, at the time, look, for a CFO, they were rejoicing because they were outsourcing costs. The data centers were no longer in a basement. They were in AWS, and you didn't have to have full-time employees. So a big boon in the early 2000s with cloud and cost savings for security practitioners. It was like a freaking nightmare because you went from knowing where all the data was and everybody who protected it to knowing where none of the data is and knowing nobody who protects it. So that was jarring. And as a result, we saw the industry create, they asked consultants, like, what do we do? And consultants said, here, use this questionnaire to go assess companies you're doing business with. So, we lost a lot of sleep thinking that, a CISO could lose their job due to the negligence of a vendor who's storing their data, a company you don't own or operate, but you got to do business with it. And then that never really stopped scaling. So, I think we had the foresight back in 2013 to see where the market was going and started investing. So we really came up with a hypothesis that said, people thought it was impossible to assess the security of a company you don't own or operate because you can't really run intrusive penetration testing and other security tests. So we invented a way where we said, you can use outside in sort of empirical analysis. You drive by the house and you see signals, is the garage door open or closed? Is there a hole in the gate? Are the windows broken? Anecdotally. And from there, you can infer how secure a company is, in a non-intrusive way and in a continuous way. So on that premise, we invented Security Scorecard, and it really gave corporations a superpower because instead of just sending a questionnaire, it gave them a portal where you could literally type in the name of any company in the world and see an up-to-date security hygiene report, a letter grade, like an A through F rating, which was easily understood, and lots of threat intelligence without having to simulate a hacker attack or go scan their network. So that was revolutionary at the time. It was really a black swan event. People's understanding of how to assess security of another company was redefined overnight. And that led to us really starting to scale the business because it was a big pain. That led to our Series A and B investments from Sequoia and Google, and to where we are today, right? We have, there's over 100,000 businesses registered in the Security Scorecard ecosystem, either large companies within really every industry around the world and their vendors are all on the platform doing diligence, providing information in their trust portals and so on. That's what Security Scorecard was and where we got to. Today though, when I think about the evolution of Security Scorecard, we launched a product at RSA called Titan. We launched a product at RSA earlier this year called Titan. And Titan was really our effort to evolve ratings into what I would call like a policy-driven operating layer. It's really a continuously learning operating layer for third party and for supply chain cyber hygiene. And that has some interesting implications because what we've done is we've completely rethought about how a third-party risk workflow and supply chain workflow should operate in an AI native world, and we've started to build capabilities for that.
I remember when Security Scorecard came around. Before that, I don't remember any sort of not only independent way of getting an idea of the security posture of a company. Like you always used to have to rely on, like you said, questionnaires, or we did this pen test, a lot of point in time stuff, but also directionality. Like you can start to see whether things are getting better or worse. And I don't remember anything like that existing before Security Scorecard. So I do have questions actually about how did you guys decide on doing ratings? Because there was so many other ways that you could have displayed this information or different ways you could have addressed the market, but you went down the road of ratings, which at that point, I didn't think anyone, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were probably first in that regard or very near first. What was the thought process that led you down the road of saying, let's just do ratings?
I think there was a couple of things that inspired us, I think, at the time to manifest this through ratings as the mechanism versus others. We were looking for something that could be ubiquitous, because we were thinking this is and is going to become a global problem. So it has to be something that anybody anywhere in the world can understand. We used to kind of joke, you want to build like a grandma's scorecard, like you could pull a grandma off the street and show her the security scorecard, and it was easy enough for anybody on the street to understand. So because we realized too, and you guys know it, when you do a third-party diligence, depending on who owns it inside of a company and how everything works, you might have really technical people like security engineers owning the diligence, or you might have someone who's like completely non-technical, like a compliance analyst, still very, very smart, but you're talking two different languages, regulatory and code, basically. So we wanted to, kind of going back to meeting the customer where they're at, we wanted to have the right language that anybody could understand. I think we looked also at, it was a tried and tested method for financial ratings. So we saw, S&P and others in the history of credit ratings. I think we studied very closely and emulated that. And then, Alex also, we were inspired by the APGAR score, right, which is a score they do when a baby's born. They, because it's a newborn, so you're limited in what kind of testing you can do. They just do observational analysis. Is the baby breathing? What color is the skin? And so on. And there's a chart that gets filled out and scored, and based on the score, that determines the health of the baby. So we looked at that, and that was sort of like, hey, it's an outside-in view of risk, and I think we emulated some of those things that we were inspired by, that we saw, and we knew deep down that every person everywhere in the world had been conditioned on an A through F scale. As long as they went to at least grade school, they probably understood the concept of A, B, C, D, F, or something like that. So we really thought about the vendors that may not have a hardcore security team, might be a 5-person team or something. You want to be able to share a security scorecard with them, and they can still digest and understand what's going on.
So Security Scorecard probably sits on what might be the largest externally sourced risk data set in existence, which is dovetailed perfectly into the AI era. What are you all seeing in that data? Has it changed? Are you seeing trends that are starting to evolve in the AI era?
There, it's a great question. There's a couple different angles and ways to answer it. Yes, definitely. One thing that we did early on was we invested very heavily in threat intelligence and data collection. In part, it was because the team that we had knew how to do that very well as engineers and cyber practitioners. That was our background. So again, we had the foresight right in a couple areas, right? One was supply chain security is only going to get worse, and two was you got to own the data, and the data is the moat. Look, we used to buy data in very early days, and it never really worked for us, because if you're rating a company and it's based in the data that you have, and you don't have atomic control of the data and the collectors, if there's ever a dispute or a customer complaint, hey, this data is not accurate, you have to chase a third party to get clarity, and it's reactive. So it always put us between a rock and a hard place. You can never satisfy the customer if you're always chasing after some third party. And there was, if you remember in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, there was proliferation of a lot of weird data suppliers too. I mean, there still is, but back then you had, I don't know, like Norse and others, they evaporated overnight because they were doing funny things to collect data. So for all those reasons, we invested really heavily upfront and for the last 12, 13 years in what I would call vertically integrating and making sure that we own the pipes and we own the collection mechanisms that pull the data. And that's been a tremendously valuable investment, because even though we don't necessarily lead by selling threat intelligence data, customers have always told us, hey, you have threat intelligence data that's as good as this separate standalone threat intelligence company that does that as their primary product. So we were always really proud of having 10, 12x coverage for many competitors, and having comparable data to people that did that for their primary job. Now, with the AI era, look, there's been a lot of interesting things that we've uncovered. I would say, and used AI to apply to. One, we looked quite a bit at exposure, right? Like exposure, I think, has really changed quite a bit. Where we acquired a company called DriftNet, which does internet scanning, and when we looked at that data, we found almost 1 million internet-facing OpenClaw agent instances. So I think that was a good illustration of how poorly controlled AI automation can become, and it also applies to third-party risk at scale. So I think people are worried about the attack surface growing exponentially with AI tools. We also took some of the foundational models and pointed them at our threat intel feeds, and that was really interesting. One of our advisors, university advisors, had pointed this out. They said, they were on the forefront, and this was a couple of years ago. They said, normally when you get a big threat intelligence feed, there's dozens or even hundreds of fields. So creating a data dictionary can be really cumbersome and manual. And oftentimes what we end up doing is we end up discarding many of the fields, and you just keep the primary fields that you need to do the analysis, like, destination port and timestamps and IP and that kind of stuff. But she said now with models, you can run your feeds through these models and get such a deeper analysis and uncovering of what you're actually collecting and what it infers. So, for example, we've been able to exponentially grow our, what I would call like the fourth party or nth party network, right? Like it's not just who are my third parties, but like who are they connected to? And the supply chain starts becoming this interconnected network. So when we started running our threat intel feeds through some of the models, things that you normally discard like became intelligence. Like, for example, you might have a field that just has like some weird wildcard characters, right? And normally you discard it, but in between the wildcards, or like it might just be question mark, asterisk, and then it says Zytel firewall 5504, and then it's like a bunch of random characters. We used to throw that away. Now we can grab that, identify that that's a product name, and infer that they're using Zytel as a product inside the network and as a vendor for that company. So we've been able to exponentially grow the interconnectivity and observation data. Net flow data gets a whole new value when you start running it through models, because you can. And then I would say the other thing is it's allowed us to look laterally through all the different feeds, because we have hundreds and hundreds of different feeds that we pull through, right? And typically you'd pull a feed and kind of identify some issues coming from it and surface it in a scorecard. But the ability to pierce across hundreds of feeds of data and reason over that and start identifying and cross-correlating, that was always done manually. Like, hey, we saw this malware payload going through here, and then, we identified in the DNS SYNCL infrastructure, it was also propagating over here. Like, that took a person to sit and query the data sets. Now agents can help identify a deeper understanding of like chain of attack, for example, and what's really going on, especially with bad actors who are persisting across multiple interfaces. They're selling data on Telegram. Maybe they're using a mobile network like the SIM network to do their hacking. So they're trying to evade capture over traditional IPv4 like public network. That type of stuff has become much easier to enrich and identify.
Yeah, it's been my experience as well. Every single time you run a model through your logs, not only do you find the answer to the problem you're looking for, but you find other problems you didn't even realize were happening.
And the regression analysis is so much easier to do too, because you can say, hey, what have the last 4 hours looked like compared to the last 30 days, right, of this IP or this behavior or this log or this set of logs? And, you know, the behavioral data also gets this like whole new, yeah, so to your point, it really gives you like an unlimited set of opportunities once you start fanning it out and getting into it. So, you know, candidly, I think we're still scratching the surface ourselves into what we can, like the value that we can mine out of the data set. I will say the biggest value though today is just coming back to the questionnaire process. Like, look, historically, people have always used the rating and then they still send a questionnaire anyway, right? And then they're trying to say, well, this is what, you know, Jimmy said on his questionnaire. Well, what does the data say compared to what Jimmy said, compared to what the SOC 2 that Jimmy provided says, and the policies and procedures? And that whole correlation takes hours. It would take 3 hours, maybe at least, for a person to do it. And I mean, in the early days, they were literally printing 2 PDFs and saying, Jimmy said this, scorecard said that, Jimmy said this, scorecard said. So it provided a value, but it also created work, right? And that can erode the value. So what I'm most excited about is when I talk about the operating fabric and the operating layer, it's the ability to run assessments and like risk assessments, third-party assessments at scale automatically through that data set, because we're sitting on, as you guys know, 13 years of historic threat intel data, plus we collect it, plus we acquired a questionnaire company called HyperComply. We have tens and tens and tens of thousands of questionnaires that have already been filled out by vendors. We have SOC 2 reports, policies, procedures. We have remediation data, people that have gone in and said, I fixed this, right? And you can measure the cadence and response time of fixing. So now to take a questionnaire and say, well, instead of sending it to Jimmy, I'm just going to run it through this data set first. It's giving our customers the ability to do what I would call like a pre-assessment, which means instead of the linear path, like, oh, let me send 500 questions, wait till I get them back, then go through validation, ask more questions. Now we can get to that validation review stage in step 1. And it's redefining the process for people. That's what's most exciting to me about the intersection of AI and threat intel, is we can completely redefine the process, which means, for example, Jimmy's company, we can say, well, here's some conflicts we found already based on the data set that we already have on Jimmy's company and what he's already done in his trust center. Maybe there's conflicts that we already need to raise before he even is asked to fill out a questionnaire. And then maybe there's things we don't know. There's controls where you need to send them out and get a questionnaire filled out, but it's substantially reducing the amount of manual work and surfacing, you know, the actions up front. The actions used to be the last thing that you do, as you guys know, right? You'd say, hey, vendor, I found these problems. You have 90 days to fix it. We can sign the contract, but like, we need you to do these things. Now, that used to be like step 5 of a vendor risk workflow. Now that's happening in step 1. So I think fundamentally, the intersection is transforming, like when we talk about AI native, it's transforming the workflows in ways that I think people have only begun to understand the implications of.
I 100% agree. I mean, there's all this talk about AGI and everyone's waiting for the model to be, you know, smarter than all of humanity combined. But just horizontally scaling the unit of chain of thought, even at a smaller level, a less intelligent level, is so underestimated, because what you can, so much of security, you're seeing it in math as well, when they just cracked that math problem that was in the news recently. And then also with Mythos and the security, it's not that necessarily these models are so smart. It's just that a lot of math and a lot of security research is that there's way too many rocks to turn over and look under. So you just get very good at having a gut feeling about which rocks to turn over to give you the highest probability of finding something. But now with AI, you can turn over all the rocks and find things that nobody would have found because they don't look under those rocks because they're low probability. And I believe that's how that math problem was solved. It wasn't that it came up with something novel. It just went down tracks that mathematicians had long ago stopped going down.
You know, chaining with memory and chaining agents with memory and the right skills and guardrails can really can really get folks a long way. I think it's still a very underestimated value that, yeah, people are starting to realize. You know, when I talk to people it's actually, Dustin, what you just said is it's an interview. Those are like the types of interview questions I've been asking actually recently, and talking. It's a topic du jour. You know, when I'm out to coffee or dinner with friends, other founders, CISOs, folks in the space, this is a big topic of discussion. It's like, how are they leveraging? And right now it's like a renaissance era, right? I hear some new method of doing these deep problem solving or analysis that I never heard. And it could be anything. It could be related to, you know, how folks are going from, how folks are like updating stale documentation in really innovative ways. It could be how they're doing incident response analysis across logs in their company. The implications, I think, are quite vast.
Let's pull on that. So like shifting hats to like the product sort of role. What are you seeing now? How has AI changed your product roadmap? Like, how does it change how your team operates? What do you ask of PMs, designers, engineers? Have the roles changed? Like, what do you look for in the types of people, the talent that you want on your team?
Everything has changed. Everything has changed. The way we build roadmaps has changed. The way that the team operates, what the bar for greatness has changed. Not just lifted, but it's changed. You know, and you guys are intimately aware yourself, like we have for, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years, we've had to put process in place for software development, because software development was very expensive. Building was expensive, and it required whole squad to come together to build capabilities. And, you know, we had scrums and ceremonies, and you guys have lived through, you know, deployments and rollbacks and like those debates of, do we fix the bug or do we build the customer priority? Like, which one do we do? Because, you know, we only have so many story points or resources this quarter to do it. And planning was done quarterly and annually. And deviating was hard, right? Like, I know it sounds so funny in hindsight. Like, that stuff was there because building was expensive, and now building is ridiculously cheap. Look, like they say, like taste and judgment don't get replaced, right? Like a mediocre person with AI tools creates mediocre output faster. But someone with the right customer attunement and empathy can just rip roar and create value exponentially. And it doesn't have to be a product manager, it can come from anywhere in the business. So look, I fundamentally believe like a few things. One, all those old school processes, throw them out the window. Like just totally throw them out the window and redefine. And I think we're redefining it in real time. No one has like a perfect way of doing things. So I'm, what's the saying? Strong opinions, loosely held. That's kind of how I'm approaching this. Like we have the right to change our mind about, like you said, we started with IDs and cursor and like auto-completing code. Now everybody's moving to CLI and they're writing no code, but doing spec-driven development. And there's so much evolution happening there. So you know what I've done at Scorecard, we've reset the process. I think I'm finding we still do like quarterly and annual roadmap planning because you want to have a vision and a trajectory, but it's all about show, don't tell. So like updates, writing long PRDs that nobody reads. Like, no, you got to have clickable prototypes, mock-ups right out of the gate. Anybody has a right to go build a product. And I think it's like the lines are blurring, guys. The lines and roles and responsibilities are blurring. There's no more world where it's like, well, that person's a this and I'm a that, and they own. It still exists to some degree, sure, but like, you know, I had conversations with folks where I say, well, you could just mock it up, and they say, well, that's going to upset my UX designer. Like, I don't want to step on their toes. And it's like, no, you can literally just type it in a screen. It's throwaway, right? Like MD files, I'm trying to get MDs to be HTML. Like I want visual everything, right? And those visual files can be updated or they can be tossed. It's so cheap to make them. So try to encourage everybody to start from prototype and visual first, no long form PRDs. Because the lines have blurred, or in some cases, like the box of the role has been erased, it's making everybody uncomfortable. Let's be real. So someone called it, and I like the term, a psycho-technological revolution, and the people part and the psychology is harder than the technology, because everybody has this existential dread around what it means for their purpose and their role. And inside of companies, like, one thing that we found was you have to give space for people to process that at a group level, and make sure people know that, because it's paradoxical. People get frozen with new technology, but it's actually, that's what causes people to not adapt. So you got to get people over that existential dread and concern, and hands on a keyboard building. There's builders and there's talkers, and you want to get everybody into the builder bucket. The talkers, unfortunately, may not cross the chasm, and they stay cynical. So it's important to set a high bar, not to say, hey, use AI per se, but just set a bar that only AI can achieve, and then give people the tools to go hit it. In terms of roles, like, what I always say is, like, because the lanes or the roles or the box, whatever, the lines have blurred, I made a goal, hey, we want to build like a Autobahn, right? And we want to try to get everybody in the fast lane. So it doesn't really matter the role. If you want to go fast, here's a lane where you can go fast and not worry about stepping on people's toes. So that means, that means you got to have your documentation in order. That means everybody has to have the repo cloned on their machine, which means you got to have cleanliness in the repos, or have a mono repo that's connected to the other repos, so people don't have to sift through thousands of different repos. Like, if it's hard to ramp a developer in a company, it's going to be hard to ramp an agent. It's going to be hard to ramp a PM. It's going to be hard to ramp a product marketer to go understand how the code works and interact with it. So, but I like the idea. I'm seeing a super compression between design, product management, product marketing, even solutions architects, right? Sales engineers and solutions architects, I think, are the up and coming product managers, because they're engineers by trade. They understand the customer probably the deepest of anybody in the company, because they're talking to customers 24/7. You start giving them AI tools, and they can rip. They might not have the most amazing UI UX understanding, but if you give them a solid design system that a good UX developer, a designer has built, an engineer with product taste or a solutions architect with customer empathy can go start building and mocking up. So that, we're still in that transformation, but there are some foundational elements that we've really mandated through the business. Everybody in product and design has to have access to AI tools. They have to have the repos cloned. They have to start with AI native in the use cases, start with prototypes that are clickable, like experiences, not write-ups. We try to get documentation updated and out of like Confluence and into GitHub, so agents can understand and digest, and it's just easier to update. There are lots of tips and tricks and maneuvers that we've gone through and that we are still going through. But it is radically changed. And the roadmap, the other thing with the roadmap is, look, I think roadmap becomes more fluid and way more dynamic. And that's uncomfortable for people, because we've always asked for that quarterly, annual roadmap thing. Look, you need an annual or quarter, you need, like, what I would say is you need not a roadmap, but a prototype that says, this is where we want to be by the end of the year. A clickable prototype that anybody in the company can see, any customer can see. That's what shows what you're building toward. It's no longer a flat PowerPoint slide. It's an actual mock-up of a product. And it might look different than the current GA product or the beta stuff that you're building, but at least that's what I think. And then that's subject to change based on the feedback that you get, based on what market's doing, based on new tools, tech. Yeah. And then the last thing I mentioned before is, like, interacting with the customer's AI tool of choice. That's the other part of product that's totally changed. If someone wants to use Claude, like, great. The output they're going to get from Claude for doing, say, third-party assessment is going to get exponentially better by connecting in my tools, my data set into it, versus just, a foundational model analyzing a PDF. Like, it can do it, but it doesn't have the context, the memory, the workflow, the historical data, and so on. So, but yeah, the long story short is that everything is changing in real time, and I think folks are still getting comfortable with it.
Yeah, you're really touching on something that Dustin and I kind of chat about often, which is this disruption in, like, what roles are, what they mean. When do you hire somebody? What types of people do you need in your organization? And like, things might just be like, I'm a prompt engineer at this level, and I know how to
Yeah.
master these agents to do my bidding. And it's really interesting just to see these engineering heavy companies really kind of lay off a bunch of people, but then hire a bunch of other people. Like there's like a specific type of role that looks like people are hiring for.
Yeah. Everybody becomes like a compute allocator, I guess, at the end of the day. So then it's like, I'm seeing a lot of success. There's interesting folks you pair together, and like it becomes like a magical output. There's interesting pairs where I've seen like sometimes a senior person and a junior person, for example, like a senior engineer. You still need a mechanic that understands how the system works, for sure. You cannot replace that. And then somebody, more junior on a product side or on a design side or on or product marketing, sitting with them, creating together, or even two senior folks, but it's not a team of 10 or a squad of 5 or 2 pizza team or whatever. It's literally 2 people. And one guy's, maybe they used to be a VP of engineering, now they're an IC. I said VPs are going away. IC is the new VP. People used to aspire and ladder climb, and now people are wanting to build because building's fun again.
Yeah, we actually seen a bunch of CTOs like defect and join Anthropic as ICs.
Yeah,
like, I don't know if you saw that. Yeah,
I did see that. We actually, and it happened to us at Scorecard too. Like someone was actually not a big fan of AI tools, and we started rolling them out, and they were like, "This is cool," and then they were like, "This is really cool," and then they were like, "This is so cool. I think I'm gonna go join Anthropic." So, and more power to them. Like I totally get it.
yeah.
But yeah, you get like one super IC, and then like a PM or someone that's like acute and deep empathy for customer needs. And the way I see it is when you're talking to customers will make some passing comment. They'll say, "Oh, that's really cool," and da 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 da. "Oh, but we do use it this way and that way," and they'll just say it like in a passing sentence. And the person that catches that sentence and they're like, "Oh, you use it that way? Like, tell me more." That's the astute. That's the refinement that I look for in the folks that can. Those are the tastemakers. They have like their antenna are up, and they're really able to sense the idiosyncratic nuances of customer needs and workflows, and you get those pairs together, and they just rip like magic. Magic happens.
It reminds me of back in the Cinchcast days, where I met Alex, your co-founder, where we were going back and forth with a client, producing a solution for them, and they wouldn't really like it. I think we were putting in a chat app, right? A chat feature to a streaming service. And after talking to the client personally as one of the ICs on the project, I realized exactly what they wanted and did it myself. That idea that the person who's actually getting the empathy, getting the information, doesn't have to go through a game of telephone through non-technical folks to get to the solution. The person who talks to the customer and feels the pain can actually develop the solution is going to be, it's just, once again, underestimated. There's so many like meta table tip overs here. I mean, everything that I've learned in my 25 years of like conventional wisdom, like how build versus buy is done. You don't do this, don't premature optimize. Every single day I find a new thing that I've banked 20 years on. I have to go, wait, does that exist anymore in this new world? It's amazing. It's exciting.
And I sometimes I have a hard time admitting that, Dustin, because I'm like, wait, am I seeing this right, or am I just like, am I getting it, or am I behind the curve, or am I ahead of? It takes sometimes. I find it takes like courage for me to recognize, like, to try to orient where my understanding of things are and where they're going, because it's changing so fast. And one that came up for me when you were talking, you gave me a flashback. How many hundreds of hours have I spent in, product manager, sales engineer, alignment calls where because if you make the sales solutions architect happy, everybody I think is happy because they understand a customer. So you get the PMs in the room daily or no weekly or monthly or whatever. You'd have a check-in where you'd say, okay, what are the top 10 things that SAs here in the field from customers, and here's our roadmap, and are the roadmap items aligned with the top 10? Like that whole thing, hundreds of done. Like I'm never doing another one of those again, because any solutions architect can just go code it themselves and show it to. And you know what? I'll admit a lot of ours were doing that in the early days of like Cloud Code, and it was making folks uncomfortable. The visceral reaction is like, hey, you're entering my territory. Hey, you did, that's not scalable. Hey, you built that in Supabase. You were supposed to do it on our architecture. And that's like the existential dread part in making space. And then
you have skunkworks everywhere.
Yeah, you got skunk. Well, then the other thing I see everybody going through is like the replatforming. And I'll tell you two things that I completely flipped on, where I thought months ago, I'm like, that's a stupid idea. And now I'm like, it's a genius idea. And like I said, I believe in like the right to change your mind. You can change your outfit based on the weather, right? And two things. One was, and I'm seeing everybody do it now. I'm like, wow, I'm glad we had the foresight back then. But I didn't. One was replatforming. People come in, as you guys know, they come into companies, they say, oh, everything everybody did before me was horrible, and I'm gonna just redo everything and it's gonna be perfect, right? It's a typical thing people do. And we had those conversations, hey, we have to replatform because it's so hard to build. Well, guess what? Replatform does nothing but make it easier to build new things. It's not like it's gonna magically change your growth. It might reduce bugs and make things go faster, but if it's 18 months to do it in this era, like a competitor or a new market entrant could come in and eat your lunch. So I thought replatforming, horrible idea. Well, guess what? Replatforming was like the best thing we ever did, because now spinning up swarms of agents to go build is so much easier. And we have folks that haven't written a line of code in 8 months or 8 weeks. And I could never say that before. So that's one thing that I completely changed my tune on. I talk to so many guys now, founders and CTOs, whatever, and they're like, oh, we got to we had to completely hire a new team and just build everything from scratch, vibe coding it and yada, yada. So we were ahead on that journey. The other one is documentation, technical writers, documentation. I realized that documentation is the linchpin for the whole agentic operation, because today most documentation inside of companies is scattered, right? Confluence, Google Docs, SharePoint, et cetera, and emails. It gets, tumbled through different hands over years and doesn't get updated, and it makes it hard to understand how complex architecture works. So I thought, just connect to MCPs, like make queries, et cetera. No, actually having technical writers who are agentic technical writers who are focused on getting all your docs into the repos. It doesn't have to be all the documentation, but like how to be a good engineer, how to write code in the company, how the system works, how the architecture works, how the collectors work, getting all that there, and then having agents go and update that documentation as new code is getting merged. Right? You can just like have scheduled agents go and update that documentation. I did not really understand the value of that before. I thought it was like, why would I invest in it? And then I just took some classes, learned more, and I realized that is everything. That is everything. Strong documentation that everybody can access can power autonomy across almost every single business unit in a company. Product marketing can go tap into that and start building. I have a guy right now who's looked in our documents, looked at what's been updated, and then he's crawling the whole website, right? And updating any collateral, white pages, materials where we've changed terminology, we've updated, or we've maybe we turned off certain modules, we don't sell them anymore, but they were exposed. So that type of stuff, I think have been some of the secrets to scale.
Absolutely. I mean, there's almost like an aspect-oriented programming aspect to it, where you can apply broad changes that would have needed a scalpel across many repos. You can do it in a broad way very quickly. It reminds me of when you can copy, the Control-Shift copy in Word or something, where you can steal the style of something and paste it on something else. That's how AI feels like to me. I can I can make you know, a broad change across multiple contexts that would have taken me having to get into the weeds on multiple places, and it can thread that needle properly for me. And then the context is king. Having the documentation there for the agents to go through if they need to. I've seen companies do their ADRs inside of their GitHub repo. It's amazing because you watched a chain of thought, and it will go across the AR documents and be like, oh, actually, I should use this pattern because they declared this in December. It's like, it's just you know, we're only scratching the surface of what you can get out of this. You know, with documentation, context, even ticket systems. How many times do I have it work on a ticket I'm about to start, and it says, actually, I should close this as a duplicate because there's another ticket over here. I'm like, wow, I would have never figured that out. You know, I would have never even bothered looking.
One of our program managers is one of the top consumers of tokens in the entire company, and it's for those reasons, because now you can look laterally across so many different systems to see what's actually going on. Normally, like you said, that would take hours every single day to do. Now they can do it. And you know what else is interesting? Separate topic, but just interesting when we look at, I know everybody debates whether token consumption is a good metric or a bad metric. I think it's a crude metric, but it's toward a directionally right outcome. There's better metrics. You know, people look at, of course, like PR velocity, but you can also just look at like time from customer intent to production. I like that one better. Like, how long does it take you to get a customer need? But that said, when I look at consumption, there's interesting insights. You see a lot of non-technical people at the top of the leaderboard, and you start digging into look, I have regional heads of sales who are building MCPs around our APIs for themselves, and then creating customer collateral instantly, right? And these are people who you might joke like you don't even know if they know how to turn on a computer, and now they're building their own tools reporting. So I would argue it's empowering, but it's also revolutionary.
Yeah, I think that in the future we may all just be AI orchestrators in different fields, and it's going to be like we're all actually using the same skills. It's just different context. You know, it used to be that engineers had their home, you know, their repo, and there's a lot of knowledge you built up over time. And if there was an issue in another repo, you threw it over the wall to them because they knew more about that repo. What we're seeing more and more is that engineers can be transients. They can move all over all the repos and make commits in 9 different repos simultaneously without having to have all that institutional knowledge. And that comes from having the context of the documentation and ADRs and things like that in the repos. There's folks out there saying that, well, that institutional knowledge will be lost over time. But I think what is important is that institutional knowledge needs to move into the repo as context and not live inside of people's brains where it's siloed there and you're one accident away from losing that information.
Yeah, you don't have the knowledge silos or that risk of knowledge exiting the building when a person decides to leave, right? And then it goes into this like weird gray space that also can be completely, well, now it can be completely automated essentially in real time. I'm seeing a lot of companies actually doesn't move to like a living, breathing documentation set.
Yeah. This has been great, Sam. I have so many other questions. I think we'll probably have you back at some point because we didn't get to.
Would be great.
Yeah. So really, thanks.
We'll do a part two. We'll do a part two.
Yeah. Let's do a part 2. This has been really good. I'm like, my head's reeling, but I want to respect your time and really thank you for joining. Sure. And thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you guys.
See you next week. Take care.
Great chatting with you guys. Thank you for having me. Bye, Danny. Bye, Dustin.